Branches of psychology. Psychology has two broad branches. One is theoretical and the other is applied. All the other subfields come under these two branches. The theoretical branch, what they do is the psychologists concentrate on carrying out research, and based on the research studies they form theories. And in the applied branch, the psychologists, they take the knowledge and the research outcome from the theoretical branch. They take all the knowledge, and what they do is they apply those knowledge to solve the real life problem. So this theoretical branch and the applied branches are interconnected. Theoretical branches of psychology: developmental psychology, child psychology, social psychology, cognitive psychology, experimental psychology, abnormal psychology, and neuropsychology. We will look into this in detail. Before that, please remember to subscribe the channel. Thank you. First one is developmental psychology. They focus on how people change and grow throughout the life. That is, from the prenatal period till death, how people change and grow. That is studied in developmental psychology. They try to understand and explain how and why people change. Then they study the physical growth, the intellectual development, the emotional changes, social growth, perceptual changes that occur over the course of lifespan. For example, usually a child walk, that is the physical milestone, children achieve between the age of 9 to 15 months. If a child is not walking or not attempting to walk till the child reach 1.5 years, then the parent consider consulting with physician in order to determine if there is any developmental issue in the child. So developmental milestones are there for every age. If it is not achieved, then it is a matter of concern. Child psychology. It deals with biological, psychological, and emotional changes that occur during childhood. Developmental psychology, throughout the life. Child psychology, they study the period during the childhood. They conduct researches on effective child rearing practices, then parenting styles, how the reinforcement work in motivating children, etc. They study the questions like what are the causes of misbehavior in children. Some kids are very aggressive, some are submissive. So what are the causes of the different kind of behavior in children? Then how a separation of the parents can affect the child, etc. are studied under the child psychology branch. Social psychology. It seeks to understand and explain social behavior. It took diverse topics, including group behavior, the social interaction and perception, then leadership, nonverbal communication, and social influence on decision making. That is how a person behave in a group, in a society, and how a society influence a person in his decision making, etc. are studied under the social psychology branch. For example, people are crowded in front of a supermarket because they raised the price of milk. People who are usually shy and peaceful, they might lose themselves in the crowd. They start acting in ways they wouldn't normally do. That is, the people who are shy and peaceful, within a crowd, their behavior will change. They may start yelling, breaking the windows, pushing the people. Even though the person was upset because of the new price of milk, they were still act out of their character. So the crowd or the society can influence the behavior of even shy people. Next is cognitive psychology. It uses information processing model to describe how the mind works, suggesting that brains store and process information much like a computer. What does the computer do? It take the data, it process it, and then provide information. Uh, Psychology suggests that the mind also works in the same way. For example, you step outside on a winter day and you feel cold wind. You step back inside and then you put on a sweater. You had a feel of the cold wind and you put on the sweater. So in between these two acts, what happened? There was a thought process. That is, you will be comfortable if you put on a sweater. You thought that, right? Or you might have some cold or cough. So wearing a sweater will be better for you. It may protect you from getting ill. So some thought process happened in between the feeling of cold and wearing the sweater. And that thought change your behavior. So all those kind of things are studied under cognitive psychology. The cognitive functions such as perception, motivation, emotion, language, learning, memory, attention, decision making, problem solving, etc. are studied under the cognitive psychology branch. Experimental psychology. It utilizes scientific methods to research the brain and behavior. Some of the methods used include experiments, correlational studies, case studies, and naturalistic observation. Some topics that might be explored in experimental psychology research include how music affects motivation, then the impact of social media on mental health, then whether a certain color changes one's thought or perception. These are examples of the studies undertaken in experimental psychology. That is, whether a color changes the thought or perception of a person, whether a music affect one's motivation, etc. Then, abnormal psychology. It involves the study of people's emotion, thought, and behavior patterns to identify, understand, and potentially resolve any issue that may be negatively affecting a person's life. So they study all the patterns of behavior so that it can be assessed and treated and the people will become better. Then mental health professional in this branch of psychology, they assess, diagnose and treat wide variety of psychological disorders. For example, a person with agoraphobia might not leave their home for years. This can cause breakdown in behavior. Another example is a person with schizophrenia might experience hallucination. This is a breakdown in cognition. So all these abnormal behavior, how it happens, why it happens, and how it can be treated, all these things are studied under abnormal psychology. Then comes neuropsychology. It focuses on the role of neurotransmitter. They are chemical substance in the brain, and it is responsible for the neural communication in different areas of brain, and it is associated with mental functions. That is, this neurotransmitter of the chemical in the brain is associated with mental functions. That is, if you feel a happiness emotion, some kind of neurotransmitter are released in the brain, and if you feel sadness, some other kind of neurotransmitter are released. So these chemicals are associated with the mental functions. They do research on people with normal functioning brain as well as on people with damaged brain, so that they can compare a normal functioning brain and a damaged brain. And they use advanced technologies like EEG, PET and fMRI, etc. For example, a stroke, it can affect the behavior, the thinking, memory and other brain functions. And evaluation of the brain, it helps determine the degree of stroke impairment. Applied branches of study. Till this time we discussed the theoretical branches of psychology. Now we are going to the applied branches of psychology. Educational psychology, clinical psychology, counseling psychology, industrial or organizational psychology, sports psychology, criminal psychology, and health psychology. Let's have a look at everything in detail. Educational psychology. It is concerned with schools, teaching psychology, educational issues, and student concerns. The educational psychologists often study how students learn. They also work directly with the students, parents, teachers, and administrators to improve the student outcome. They also study learning disabilities, giftedness, and instructional process. There is a difference between the educational and school psychology. Usually, they overlap in their training and functions to some extent, but differ in important ways. The educational psychologists are more involved in teaching and research at the college or the university level. They focus on larger and more diverse groups in their research, while the school psychologists are more focused on working with a particular school. The educational psychologists in a broader or a larger group they are dealing, and in school psychology they are focused on working with particular school and with individual students and their families. So that is the difference between the educational psychology and the school psychology. Then comes clinical psychology. It is concerned with the assessment and treatment of mental illness, abnormal behavior, and psychiatric disorder. They often work as a part of a collaborative team that may include physicians, psychiatrists, and other mental health professionals. So here they are concerned with the assessment and treatment of mental illness or abnormal behavior. In the theoretical branches, we studied that abnormal psychology is there. What they do, they study the abnormal behavior and mental disorder. And in the what the clinical psychologists do, they focus on application of the psychological science. And they use psychometric assessment in diagnosing and treating abnormal behavior, mental disorder, and other illness. So the abnormal psychology, they conduct research and they form theories. And this is the applied part, and they apply all those knowledge in assessment and treatment of the abnormal behavior. Then counseling psychology. The counseling psychologists often work with psychologically stable individuals. In clinical psychology, they are concerned with people with abnormal behavior, and in counseling psychology, they are dealing with psychologically stable individuals. People have stresses in life. Then there will be social anxieties, emotional distress, inability to sleep, etc. And all these stress or anxiety are related to their work life, maybe family dynamics, maybe chronic pain, then any compulsive disorders, maybe the issues in romantic relationship or having a substance abuse. All these things can cause stress or anxiety or the inability to sleep or other distresses. Okay. So the goal of the counseling psychology is to provide those peoples to provide the coping skills. They need to cope with the stressors in their life. That help is provided by the counseling psychologist. Then comes industrial or organizational psychology. It applies psychological principles to workplace issues. It studies the topics such as worker attitude, employee behavior, the organizational process, and leadership. And they seek to improve the productivity and efficiency in the workplace. So all these things are studied, the behavior, the attitude, the process, everything is studied, and based on the study, they seek to improve the productivity and efficiency of the workplace, meanwhile maximizing the well-being of the employees. So all these things come under the industrial or the organizational psychology. Sports psychology. It is a study of how psychology influences sports, athletic performance, exercise, and physical activity. Individuals may work with a sports psychologist to improve their focus, to develop mental toughness, to increase motivation, or reduce sport-related anxiety. Before a sports event, they might be anxious about the event. Then they need motivation. So sometimes the previous failure can give a depression to the sports person. So all these things are taken care by a sports psychologist. The sports psychologist can also play important role in reducing obesity, particularly in children. They can help the kids by increasing their physical activity and their enjoyment of the activity, and thereby reducing the obesity. Next is criminal psychology. It is concerned with identifying the cause of crime. That is why the crime happened. Then studying the personality of the criminals. Then suggesting preventive measures to control the criminal behavior and implementing plans for criminal rehabilitation. That is, once they are out of jail, they need a place in the society. So all these things are studied and taken care by a criminal psychologist. They play significant role in forensic department also to uncover the scene of crime by understanding and interpreting the behavioral clues of criminals. Usually the criminal psychology and forensic psychology are used interchangeably, but the criminal psychology, they deal with the behavior of the criminal, and the forensic psychology is more into the legal aspects of psychology. So that is the difference. Then health psychology. Here they focus on how biology, psychology, behavior and social factor influence one's health and how they can cause illness. This branch of psychology involves promotion of health across a wide variety of domains, and they deal with the prevention and treatment of disease and illness. The health psychologists deal with health-related issues such as weight management, smoking cessation, stress management, and nutrition. For example, people know that eating a diet high in sugar is not good for their health. Again, people continue to engage in such behavior regardless of the short-term or the long-term consequences. Health psychologists look at the psychological factors that influence these health choices and explore ways to motivate people to make better health choices. Other branches of psychology. Environmental psychology. It studies the interaction of physical factors such as temperature. That is, you may have heard about seasonal depression. It is a psychological response to the reduced sunlight during winter. People who live in northern climates, there it is very colder and darker during the winter and the sunlight is very reduced. So the people get depression. Then humidity, pollution and natural disasters, etc. can influence or impact human behavior. These things are studied under the environmental psychology. The influence of physical arrangement of the workplace on health, the emotional state and interpersonal relation are also investigated under this branch. Cultural and close cultural psychology. It examines the role of culture in understanding the behavior, thought and emotion. It assumes that human behavior is not only a reflection of human biological potential, but also a product of culture. A cultural psychologist examines how the culture in general causes some people to be submissive and others to be aggressive, while the cross-cultural psychologists research the patterns between two cultures. The cultural psychologists study things happening within a culture and the cross-cultural psychology studies the patterns between two cultures to better understand the human race. The other branches of psychology that are emerging. Aviation psychology. It focuses on the psychological aspects of flying. Space psychology. It focuses on the astronauts, the psychological aspect of the astronauts. Then military psychology. It deals with military personnel and their families. It is very common for the returning military veterans to experience post-traumatic stress disorder. Then forensic psychology. It is the application of psychology to the legal field. Rural psychology. The program gives people access to mental health service and the help they would otherwise not have received. Then engineering psychology. It applies principle of psychology to the design of complex systems. Then managerial psychology. It uses behavioral science concept, construct theories, methods and tools that are used and applied to issues that people encounter in their work and career. Then community psychology. It focuses on social issues, social institutions and other settings that influence individuals, group and organization. Then psychology of women. It studies the women's behavior and experience within social context across the life cycle and advocates them for change at the individual, organizational and societal level. Then political psychology. They attempt to understand the psychological structure, roots and consequences of political behavior. So today we discuss the theoretical, applied and various other emerging branches of psychology. Hope you like this video. Please share it with your friends. Thank you and keep smiling.